everyone, I'm Dr. Rizwana, working as a professor of physics in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today our topic of discussion is PN junction and its VI characteristics. So in my previous video, I have discussed in detail about different types of semiconductors, P-type semiconductors, N-type semiconductors, and we have explained them based on their energy level diagram. So by taking those P-type and N-type semiconductors, we'll try to form PN junction, and once we combine P-type and N-type semiconductors, how characteristic of a material is going to change, that we are going to discuss now. So proceeding further, now what is a PN junction? So talking about PN junction, generally this PN junction, it is formed when a layer of P-type semiconducting material, it is placed with a layer of N-type semiconducting material. So here what we are going to do, we are going to take both the P-type material as well as N-type material. So we are going to take P-type semiconductor and N-type semiconductor, and then we are going to join them together. We'll combine them in such a way that atoms of P-type combine with atoms of N-type. So here, not only just joining this P-type and N-type semiconductors, but we have to combine them in such a way that atoms of P-type should they should mingle with the atoms of N-type in such a way that the total arrangement is called as PN junction. Now, before going into detail what happens once PN junction is formed, just quickly we'll recollect what exactly is P-type and N-type semiconductors. So we have seen that if we take intrinsic semiconductors, intrinsic semiconductors, we have a silicon and germanium. So if we take intrinsic semiconductors like silicon, and to that silicon if we add, if we add travalent impurities which belong to group 3 elements, suppose I have added boron, then this boron, it has got 3 valence electrons. Out of those 3 valence electrons, what it will do, it will form 3 covalent bonds with adjacent silicon atoms. So boron, it is going to form 3 covalent bonds with adjacent silicon atoms, but coming to this 4th bond position, there is lack of electrons. So what this boron will try to do, it will try to accept electron from valence band of silicon atom. And during this process, what exactly happens, we'll have holes in the valence band of silicon crystal, and whereas this boron atom, it is going to become negatively charged. So here, if we talk in terms of its energy level diagram, so here, if we just consider their energy level diagram, this is our conduction band and this is our valence band. Then we have one more energy level, which is acceptor energy level, and this acceptor energy level, it belongs to energy level of this travalent impurities. First, this acceptor energy level is empty, and when we go for high temperature, not high temperatures, but when we little bit increase our temperature, at very low temperature, we'll have transition of electron from valence band to acceptor energy level. So thereby we'll have formation of holes in valence band, and then we have this travalent impurities becoming negatively ionized. So whatever travalent impurities we are adding to intrinsic semiconductor, they have this capacity of accepting electrons and becoming negatively ionized. So at very low temperatures, we are able to get holes in valence band without creating any electrons in conduction band. So that's why when we talk about holes, we talk only in terms of holes. So here majority charge carriers are holes. So when we take P-type semiconductor, so we have holes large in numbers, and there are few electrons. So those are called as minority carriers. And similarly, when we talk about N-type semiconductors, so in N-type semiconductors, what we are going to do, again, we'll take our intrinsic semiconductor like silicon or germanium. Suppose I have taken silicon crystal. So if I take this silicon crystal, and to that silicon crystal, if I add group 5 element, which is pentavalent impurity. So group 5 element, and suppose I have added phosphorus. Phosphorus, it belongs to group 5. And if we add such pentavalent impurities, and we know that these pentavalent impurities, they have 5 valence electrons. So what these pentavalent impurities will do, out of those 5 valence electrons, they'll form 4 covalent bonds with adjacent silicon atoms by sharing their 4 valence electrons. And what about their 5th electron? Because this 5th electron is not taking part in bond formation, it will be a free electron. And because it's a free electron, so we are contributing electron to conduction band of intrinsic semiconductor without any formation of holes in a valence band. So here, what you will observe when we talk in terms of energy level diagram, here also if you take conduction band, that is bottommost energy level of a conduction band, and if I take EV, which is topmost energy level of valence band, and here we have one more energy level. That energy level, it is called as donor energy level. And what exactly is donor energy level? This is the energy level which is belonging to the 5th free electron of this pentavalent impurity. So here, and why we are taking this energy level very close to conduction band? Because already it is free, it is not taking part in covalent bond formation, so it's a free electron. So that's why obviously its energy level, it will be close to the conduction band. And first, what you will observe here is, depending upon how many number of pentavalent impurities we are adding, we'll have so many number of 5th electrons in this donor energy level. And when we slightly increase our temperature, then what happens here now, if you take these pentavalent impurity, they have this tendency to lose their electrons. So they'll try to give their electrons to conduction band of intrinsic semiconductor. So here we'll observe that you will have transition of electron from donor energy level to conduction band. So what exactly this pentavalent impurity is doing? This pentavalent impurity, it is donating its electron to conduction band. So that's why pentavalent impurities, they will become positively ionized, and we are able to get free electrons in conduction band without any formation of holes in valence band. So that's why when we consider N-type semiconductor, we talk only in terms of electrons. So here we talk only in terms of electrons. So that's why now when we are talking about formation of p-n junction, purely we talk about holes in p-type semiconductor, and we talk about electrons in n-type semiconductor. So just now, we had quick recap of how holes and electrons are majority charge carriers in p-type and n-type semiconductors respectively. So coming back to our p-n junction. So when we talk about p-n junction, so what we are doing, I have taken a layer of p-type. Okay, usually we'll prefer wafer of p-type as well as n-type. So wafer, it is nothing but a thin layer. So we'll take very thin layer of p-type material. Also we'll take very thin layer of n-type material. And then after that, what we'll do, we'll combine them together. Okay, so once, as you can see in this particular point, what we are doing, we are combining p-type and n-type semiconductors, and then there is a formation of p-n junction, and this formation of p-n junction by combination of p-type and n-type semiconductors, so it is called as junction diode, or simply it is called as p-n diode. So when we combine p-type and n-type semiconductors, so that particular system, combination of p-type and n-type, giving rise to a junction which is p-n junction. So it is nothing but junction diode. It is also called as p-n diode, or simply we can call it as diode. Okay, so here as you can see in this figure, what I have done, I have taken p-type silicon. So what do you mean by p-type silicon? Here my base material is silicon. So which intrinsic semiconductor we have taken here? Silicon. To that silicon, what I have done, I have added trivalent impurities giving rise to p-type silicon. And here I have n-type silicon. So here also our base intrinsic material is silicon. To that, when we add pentavalent impurities, it will form n-type silicon. And when we combine this p-type and n-type silicon, of course there is formation of p-n junction, which is also called as junction diode. And what is the symbol of the junction diode? So as you can see in the below figure, this is the symbol for junction diode. So here we have symbol for junction diode. So this is the p-type of p-n junction, which is represented by triangle. And whereas if you take this vertical line, it represents n-type of p-n junction. So this represents p side and this represents n side of p-n junction. So which is a diode. And this p-type, it will represent anode, whereas this n side of p-n junction, it will represent cathode. So this will refer to positive side and this will refer to negative side. And this particular notation, it is taken as symbol for PN junction diode, where we are representing it with a triangle followed by vertical line. In triangle it represents P side, and whereas this vertical line it represents N side. So this is our symbol for PN junction diode. Now, as you can see in this figure, left side figure, here I have combined, of course, p-type and n-type semiconductors. So as you can see here in this p-type and n-type semiconductors, we know that in p-type semiconductors, what are the majority charge carriers? We have holes. And what is the charge of hole? We know that this holes, they are vacant electron site, and we assume them to be positively charged. And whereas coming to n-type, here we have majority charge carriers electrons, and of course electrons are obviously negatively charged. And once we combine these thin layers of p-type and n-type semiconductors, as you can see here, there is a formation of junction layer. So there is a formation of one junction layer, and of course that junction, it is called as depletion. And once PN junction is formed, what exactly will happen, that we are going to discuss in our next slide. So for the time being, what we are saying from this slide, what we have started, we said that when we take a thin layer of p-type and n-type semiconductors, when we combine them, we have formation of PN junction, and this PN junction, it is called a diode. And what we have seen here is P side of this diode, it is represented by a triangle, and N side of diode, it is represented by vertical line. And when we talk about this p-type and n-type, we say that in p-type we have holes as majority charge carriers, and when we take n-type, we have electrons as majority charge carriers. Now what happens when we have such a system whose one side we have one type of majority charge carriers, on the other side we have another type of charge carriers? What exactly phenomena are going to take place, we are going to see in our next slides. Now, next we are going to discuss what exactly happens when PN junction is formed. So here, what you will observe here is when PN junction is formed, as you can see here, since N region, so if you take, again, if I draw this figure of PN junction, if I take this PN junction, here I have p-type and here I have n-type. In p-type, I have lot of holes, and whereas in n-type, I have lot of electrons. So here there are so many electrons. Okay, so now as you can see here, in N region, we have high electron concentration. So if you take this N side, what are the majority charge carriers? Electrons, and we have very few number of holes. Similarly, if I go to P region, in P region I have high hole concentration, where we have whole numbers. So here we have majority of holes, and of course very few numbers of electrons. So here, as you can see onto the left, which represents P region, here we have higher concentration of holes. Whereas onto the right side, we have N region, where we have higher concentration of electrons. So now, we know that when there is one region where we have higher concentration, and in the other region if we have lower concentration, then which process is going to take place? That particular process, it is called as diffusion. So this process, it is called as diffusion. So diffusion of charge carriers takes place once PN junction is formed. So what do you mean by diffusion of charge carriers? Diffusion of charge carriers is nothing but flow of charge carriers from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. As you can see, in P region, we have lot of holes, whereas in N region, we have very few number of holes. So what you will observe here is, holes from P region, slowly they'll start moving towards the N region. So you'll have flow of holes going from P region to N region. And whereas in N region, we have plenty of electrons, in P region we have very small number of electrons. So that's why here we have flowing of electrons from N region to P region. So here diffusion of electrons is taking place. So first we have diffusion of holes from P region to N region, and then we have diffusion of electrons from N region to P region. Okay, where there is flow of charge carriers from higher concentration region to lower concentration region. And as you can see, because of flow of these charge carriers, what will happen? Diffusion current will exist. So there will be formation of diffusion current because of flow of electrons as well as because of flow of holes. So as you can see here, and this electrons which are coming from N region to P region, what they'll try to do, they'll try to occupy holes in that region. So this is very important point which we have to understand. So first thing, what we said is once PN junction is formed, because there is dissimilarity in their concentration. So that's why what we are saying here is diffusion of charge carriers takes place. First, suppose when we talk about electrons which are coming from N region. So these electrons, they have started penetrating P region. So once they go to P region, what they'll try to do, they will try to occupy holes in that region. And these electrons which have migrated from N region to P region, so what they'll do now, they'll become negative ions. Now they are not electrons, but we represent them as negative. We can say that they become immobile negative electrons. Right? Similarly, holes. These holes, when they go from P region to N region, what they'll try to do, they'll try to combine with electrons in P region. And now these holes, what they'll become immobile once they go to N region. Okay, and they are taken as immobile positive holes or positive charges. I hope you are able to understand here what we are doing here. Now as you can see here, I have P region and this is our N region. In P region we have holes. In N region we have electrons. Now holes, they have started migrating to N region. When these holes go there, what they'll do, they actually, we can say that they'll combine with electrons in N region, and these holes, they'll become immobile positive charges which gets accumulated on the N side of junction. And similarly, electrons which are migrating from N region to P region, what they'll do, they'll go and they'll combine with holes, they'll lose their energy, and now they'll become immobile negative charges which are forming on the P side of PN junction. And as you can see here, this positive and negative, if you look at this figure, in this figure, what we are doing at this junction, suppose this is this dotted line is representing the region which is separating P-type and N-type of PN junction. Then what we will observe here is, in between this P-type and N-type, a layer is formed. In that layer, there will be accumulation of immobile charge carriers. You will have lot of immobile charge carriers accumulating. Now, why we are saying that they are immobile or they are charge carriers which are not taking part in conduction? As we told that, suppose if it is P region and if this is N region, in P region we have lot of holes and in N region we have lot of electrons. So as we said that these holes which are positively charged, when they go towards the N region, what they are doing, they are giving their energy by combining with electrons. So what happens to those holes when they go to that N side? They'll become immobile. So they become immobile positive ions, and they are taken as, they are represented by this plus symbol in order to show that now they are without energy because they have lost their energy by recombining with electrons in the P region. So these are immobile negative ions, and where they are formed near the N region. And similarly, when these electrons in N region, when they go to this P region, they'll give their energy to holes, they'll lose their energy to holes, or we can say that this process, it is also called as recombination. I think in last video I have discussed in detail about recombination of electron hole pairs as well as generation of electron hole pairs. So actually here recombination is taking place, where you will observe that charge carriers, they are going to lose their energy. So here, because of recombination of electron and hole pairs, here charge carriers, they are going to lose their energy and they are going to become immobile. It means that they won't take part in conduction. So similarly, as I told, these electrons, once they go to P region, they combine with few of the holes, and what will happen now, they become immobile negative charges. So here across the junction we have accumulation of immobile charges. So near to the N region we have positive polarity, and whereas near to the P region we have negative polarity. So as you can see here, there is development of or separation of charges in the junction, and once we have process of this formation of immobile charges in the junction, then what exactly happens in our PN junction, that we are going to see in the next figure. Now this figure, it will help us to understand what exactly happens when PN junction is formed. So as you can see here in this figure, so as you can see, on to the left side we have N region, and then on to the right side we have P region. And N region we have lot of course there are electrons are there, and whereas in the P region we have holes, right? And then as you can see, this is our junction. Okay, this is the region where N type and P type join together, and this dotted line represents the region which is separating N region and P region. As you can see here, these are the electrons. So this minus which we have kept here, these minus, they represent the electrons which are majority charge carried in region. When these electrons, when they get migrated to P region, so they are represented like this, minus, and they are of course given by a circle. So they represent, as you can see what I have written here, they are called as negative acceptor ions. Now what do you mean by negative acceptor ions? It means that we are talking about immobile electrons or immobile charges. So these are immobile electrons. Similarly, as you can see, these are our holes which are represented by plus symbol in P region. And when this plus symbol, when it goes to N region, then what will happen because of diffusion process? When it goes there, because it is going and it is losing its energy by occupying or when by recombining with electrons in N region. So as you can see, this plus sign which is surrounded by a circle, what is it? It is representing positive donor ion. So it is positive donor ion, or simply we can call it as immobile hole without any energy. So here as you can see, this left part, it has become positively charged, and whereas this right part, it has become negatively charged. And because of this charge separation, under equilibrium condition, a potential will be developed. So a potential difference will be developed in this junction area. So this area which is separating P side and N side region. So this is called as junction, and in this junction we have separation of charges, and under equilibrium condition a voltage is developed in this junction region. And what is the role played by this voltage? This voltage, it will stop further diffusion of charge carriers. So here one voltage will be developed. So here we have formation of voltage, and what is the role played by this voltage? So this voltage developed, what it will do? It will prevent further diffusion of charge carriers. So it is going to prevent further diffusion of charge carriers. So here what you'll observe here is, of course, because we have lower concentration region and higher concentration region, because of that we have diffusion of charge carriers. And what we have seen here is, once this migration of holes and electrons across the junction is going on, then what we'll observe here is, after some time there will be full stop to this flow of charge carriers. Why? Because a voltage will be developed, and this voltage, it is developed because of formation of immobile charges across the junction. And what you will observe here is, and what is the role played by this voltage? It is going to prevent further diffusion of charge carriers. So there won't be any further flow of charge carriers, that is flowing from electrons from N region to P region, and flowing of holes from P region to N region, it will be stopped once this voltage is developed. And this voltage developed, okay, so it is called as potential barrier. So what is the name we are giving to this voltage developed? It is called as potential barrier. And this potential barrier is developed only under equilibrium condition. So under equilibrium conditions, so voltage will be developed. This voltage, it is called as potential barrier. And what is the role played by this potential barrier? This potential barrier, it is going to stop further diffusion of charge carriers. And this particular region where we have immobile charge carriers, this layer, it is called as depletion layer. So here, this layer, it is called as depletion layer. And why it is called depletion layer? Because this particular layer, it is depleted of mobile charge carriers. So whatever charge carriers are present in this depletion layer, they are immobile, they are without energy, they don't take part in conduction. So this particular area or this particular region which is separating P region and N region, so it has not got any charge carriers, mobile charge carriers. So that's why it is called as depletion layer. And what is the other name we can give to this depletion layer? It is also called as space charge region. So it is also called as space charge region. Okay. So in this depletion layer, we have lot of immobile charge carriers. And as you can see, this particular figure, it shows potential difference which is developed across the junction. And what this potential difference is going to do, it is going to stop further diffusion of charge carriers. Now, as you can see how this potential difference is being created. So as you can see in the junction, I'm talking about the junction. So across the junction layer, this side, it is acting as positive terminal. And whereas this side, it is acting as negative terminal. And these are immobile charge carriers. And why we are getting this positive terminal in this region? These are nothing but your holes, okay, which have lost their energy and which are ready to give their electrons. And whereas if you take this negative terminal, in negative terminal, here we have electrons without energy and which are ready to take energy and then jump to conduction band. Okay, so that's why this formation of immobile charge carriers, they have given rise to barrier voltage, which prevents further flow of charge carriers. So here completely we have discussed about the phenomena known as the diffusion. Of course, this minus, as you can see, this minus in N region, they represent free electrons, electrons with energy. Whereas if that minus, it is surrounded by a circle, which are formed in P region, they represent immobile electrons without energy, or we can also call it as negative acceptor ions. And similarly, this plus sign, they represent positive holes. And if these holes, if they are surrounded by this circle, what does they represent? They represent positive donor ions. They are ready to give their electrons. Whereas this acceptor ion, they are ready to jump to the conduction band and behave as the free electrons. So this is about the formation of depletion layer or barrier voltage once p-n junction is formed. And also we have discussed in detail phenomena of diffusion occurring once there is formation of p-n junction. So all this we have discussed, as we have seen that once a p-n junction is formed, we have electrons and holes move to the other side of the junction. So what they'll do, they'll leave exposed charges on dopant atom sites, which are fixed in the crystal lattice. It means that we are talking about charge carriers without energy. So therefore, on the N side, what we have positive ion cores, and on the P side, we have negative ion cores. And because of such charge separation, electric field E, it forms between positive ion cores in N-type material and negative ion cores in P-type material. So if you go back to our figure, so what we have here in N-type material, these are positive ion cores, and whereas in P-type material, we have negative ion cores. So that's why here electric field E is formed. And what is the role of this electric field? It will sweep. So this electric field sweeps free carriers out of this region, and this region, it is called as depletion region because it is depleted of free charge carriers. And this is also called as barrier potential. So this barrier potential, it is formed because of this electric field. And here what you will observe here is, and this diffusion, as we know that here once this electric field is formed, so now after this diffusion process has taken place, and once there is formation of potential barrier and depletion layer, there is one more phenomena which comes into effect, and that phenomena, it is called as drifting. So drifting of charge carriers. So for diffusion of charge carriers, we don't have to supply external electric field. So here movement of charge carriers takes place without any force or without any application of electric field, where charge carriers, they'll try to flow from higher concentration to lower concentration region. Whereas in drifting, will force charge carriers to move because of force exerted by external electric field. So once electric field is formed because of diffusion process, now drifting process will take place. How exactly drifting process will take place? As you can see, as this diffusion of charge carriers from both sides continues, then what we'll observe here is negative ions. They'll form a layer of negative space region along the p side. Already we have seen in the previous figure. Similarly, a positive space charge region, it is formed by positive ions on the inside, and this positive space charge region, it attracts. So what it will try to do? Because it will try to gain energy, so that's why it will try to attract electron from p side. And similarly, this negative space charge region which is formed, it will try to attract holes from inside. So here, as you can see, because of formation of electric field, what this negative ions will do, these negative ions, they'll try to attract electrons, as you can see here. So here, they'll try to attract holes from inside to p side. Similarly, this positive space charge regions, they'll try to attract electrons from p side to inside. Now here we are forcing charge carriers to move. And when charge carriers move under the force or under the action of electric field, then that particular flow of charge carriers, it is called as drift. So here now drifting of charge carriers will take place. So here there are two types of phenomena taking place. One is diffusion and drift, and there are two types of flow of current. One is diffusion current, which does not need any external electric field, and next one is drift current, which is formed once electric field is developed in the depletion layer. And what you will observe here is these two currents will start flowing in opposite direction, and when we talk in terms of their magnitude, they are equal. So this is what going to happen when once p-n junction is formed. So here we have come across two important phenomena. One is diffusion, another one is drifting. So diffusion of charge carriers as well as drifting of charge carriers. So here first diffusion process takes place, and because of diffusion process we are going to take diffusion current. And once diffusion has taken place and once there is development of electric field in the junction layer, we have drifting of charge carriers, where charge carriers, because of attraction, they are forced to move from one side to other side, and there is also current being developed because of drifting. And here current due to diffusion and current due to drifting of charge carriers, both are magnitude wise equal, but their direction of flow will be opposite. So now next we are going to talk about, of course, till now we have discussed what happens when p-n junction is formed. So, but what we have to learn here is how to form a p-n junction. So, what exactly happens when p-n junction is formed? We have talked a lot about diffusion and drifting and all this process we have discussed, and how there is formation of potential barrier and what is the role of potential barrier once it is formed, we have discussed. But how to form p-n junction, how to combine p-type and n-type semiconductors. So that we are going to discuss now. So here we know that how p-n junction is formed. p-n junction is formed when we combine p-type and n-type semiconductor. So p-n junction is formed when we combine p-type and n-type semiconductor. So it gives rise to p-n junction. Now p-n junction, it cannot be just merely formed by bringing two layers together. So just if we bring a p-type layer and n-type layer, and if we just place them side by side, there won't be any formation of p-n junction. So there are some techniques in order to form p-n junction. Now we are going to discuss those techniques of forming p-n junction. Now here in this slide or in this video, I'm going to discuss about three different methods of forming p-n junction. So what are those three different methods of forming p-n junction? First method, it is called as grown junction type. So first method, it is called as grown junction type, and coming to second method of formation of p-n junction, it is called as fused or allowed junction type. Then third type, it is called as diffused junction type. Okay, so first method it is grown junction type, second one is fused or allowed junction type, and third one it is called as diffused junction type, and these are the most common methods used in order to form PN junction. Now we are going to discuss about first method. So what is the first method? First method is grown junction type. So from the name itself we can make out what is grown junction type. So, grown junction type is where we are forming PN junction during growth of crystal. So, here in this method, what we are going to do, so as you can see here carefully, I'll take, actually first I'll take extrinsic semiconductor. Here, of course, P-type and N-type layers in PN junction, they are formed from melt. Of course, we know that this P-type and N-type semiconductors, they are extrinsic semiconductors. And in which state we'll take these semiconductors, we'll try to grow them when they are in the state of melt or molten state. Hot liquid, it is called as molten state. Okay, so and what you will observe here is when we are growing crystal from molten state during growth process, during the middle of growth process, what we'll do, we'll add different types of impurities so that on one side we have formation of P-type, on the other side we have formation of N-type. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. So what I'm going to do first, I'll take, suppose I'm forming these extrinsic semiconductors from silicon. So first what I'll do, I'll take silicon in molten form. So it's a hot liquid, I'll take silicon in molten form. Suppose this is our crucible or this is our container, okay, where we have taken our silicon. So here first I have my silicon in molten state. So this is our silicon in molten state. Hot liquid, it is called as molten state. I have taken silicon. Now let us suppose that now here I have one opening, and through this opening what type of impurities I am sending? Let us suppose that I have started entering phosphorus atoms. So I'm making phosphorus atom center, and they belong to which group? Fifth group. So once I make these phosphorus atoms enter this molten state, and once these phosphorus atoms go and mix with this molten silicon, so what type of layer will be formed here? Here there will be formation of N-type layer. So below we have formation of N-type layer. Now next, of course, here still I am keep on pouring this molten silicon liquid, and then what I'll do on the top layer, again there will be one opening, and through this opening what I'll do, I'll try to inject, so opposite type of impurities. Down we have used which type of impurities? Phosphorus atoms. Now up I'll try to inject trivalent impurities. What are those trivalent impurities? Which belong to group T, and this trivalent impurities, suppose I have taken boron atoms, and these boron atoms, they are injected into the top surface of this crucible, and once you have these boron atoms going inside, when they get mixed with silicon in molten state, then your top layer, it is going to become P-type. Okay, and once you solidify this molten state extrinsic semiconductors, you have formation of PN junction. So here grown junction type means we are forming a crystal, okay, from molten state. And what we'll do, we'll add different types of impurities. First, I'll add one type of impurity, and then after that, I'll start adding opposite type of impurity, so that one side there will be formation of one type of extrinsic semiconductor, and the other side will have formation of another type of impurity. So as you can see here, so suppose if I take silicon crystal and first I am exposing it to pentavalent impurity, which is phosphorus atoms. So once there is formation of N-type crystal, then what I'll do during this growth process, during growing of crystal from the molten state, then what I'll do, I'll stop injecting phosphorus atoms, and then I'll start injecting boron atoms, so that after this there will be formation of P-type layer. So this particular process, it is called as grown junction type, and this figure, it will help you to understand this growth junction process very as you can see in this figure. So here I am talking about this figure. As you can see, I have, of course, in this particular figure, which intrinsic semiconductor we have taken? We have taken germanium. So our germanium, it is in molten state, okay, and then what we have done, we have taken it in graphite crucible. So here we have to select our crucible which does not react with molten intrinsic semiconductor. So we have taken this molten germanium in graphite crucible. And then what we have done, so here in order to inject impurities, we are making use of this tube. So this tube, it is called as impurity doping tube. Okay. So here, what we are doing here, so of course, as you can see, we are injecting indium. Indium, it belongs to group 3. Okay. So in order to form p-type, what we are doing, we are injecting indium p plus doping. And as you can see, so pull direction. So pull direction means where you are trying to grow crystal, single crystal. So this is the direction of the pull. And here what we are doing next, we are adding N-type layer. So here you have formation of first p-type and then we have N-type layer. So what exactly we are trying to do? We are trying to add different types of impurities at different levels. And in order to maintain this germanium in molten state, what we are doing, this crucible, it is of course surrounded by a thermocouple and it is for temperature contact. So here what we are doing, generally we are going for heating, and in order to maintain temperature, we are going for this thermal detector, which is nothing but thermocouple. So this is how we are going to form our PN junction using method of chrome junction diode. Now coming to second method. Second method is quite simple compared to our first method. Second method, it is called as fused or allowed junction type. So second method, it is called as fused or allowed junction type. And as I told you, this method, it is quite simple compared to our first method. So in this type, what we are doing, I have taken p-type and n-type material. And here in this case, when we are taking p-type and n-type material, they should be in wafer form. So what do you mean by wafer? Wafer is nothing but very thin layer. So wafer, it is very thin layer of either p-type or n-type material. You have to take your p-type, n-type material whose thickness is very, very small. And then what we'll do, we'll keep them in contact. So we'll keep them in contact and then we'll try to fuse them. How we'll try to fuse them? By going for heat treatment. So what we'll do, we'll go by going for proper heat treatment, then we'll try to make this p-type and n-type layer get fused to each other. And this particular phenomena, it is called as fused or allowed junction type. And here there is, as you can see, one method is explained in the figure given in this slide. What I have done, I have taken a thin, actually this is not water, this is wafer. So I have taken thin wafer of n-type germanium. So what I have done, I have taken N-type germanium. What do you mean by N-type germanium? We have taken germanium and to that germanium we have added pentavalent impurities and it should be a thin wafer. So thickness of that N-type germanium, it should be very, very small. Okay, then after that what we have done, so on this thin wafer of N-type layer, what I have done, I have just added a small dot of indium. What is indium? Indium, it belongs to group 3 or you can also say that it is a p-type material. Then after that what I have done, I have started heating it. So during few minutes of heat treatment, you will observe that indium atoms, they'll fused onto the surface of germanium and they produced p region on the top surface of your wafer type n-type layer. So this gives rise to p-type region with n-type germanium wafer. Okay, so forming PN junction. So this is how you can form, or the other way is, instead of taking thin wafer of N-type, what I have done here, I have taken thin layer of P-type wafer. So this is our wafer, but it is P-type. On that what I have done, actually this should be N-type wafer. Sorry, this is N-type wafer. So here we have taken N-type germanium wafer. On that we have kept indium dot, and when we have heated it, so this is what happens here, as you can see in the three-dimensional view. So first dot, it is just kept on the surface of N-type wafer. Then in the second case, what happened? Now, as you can see, this dot of indium, it has got diffused on the top region of N-type. So it has got diffused, it has gone inside the N-type germanium. So once this process takes place, then what you will observe here is this dot region, where we have added dot to wafer of N-type layer. So this region, it will become P side, whereas your down region, it will become N side. So this is how we are going to form fused or allowed junction type. semiconductors. Now coming to last process. So last process of formation of PN junction, here we have diffused junction type. So here we are talking about diffused junction type. Now in diffused junction type, what we'll do here, actually here we'll take in this process, of course, diffusion of here also diffusion is nothing but we have just seen when we have discussed formation of PN junction. So diffusion process, it refers to the process where we have flow of charge carriers from higher concentration to lower concentration. So in this case, we'll try to take our impurities in gas form. So here diffusion process, we'll try to do it in gas atmosphere. So in this case, as you can see here also I have taken wafer, N-type wafer. So here also I have taken N-type wafer. So what do you mean by wafer? Where we are taking very thin layer of N-type material. And what I have done, I have kept it on a metal contact. Okay, very thin layer of N-type germanium I have taken. Then after that, what I am doing, so actually this N-type wafer, it is kept in a furnace. So it is kept in a furnace. What exactly is a furnace? Furnace is a device in which we'll try to heat a material. So which will maintain very hot atmosphere. So we have kept this N-type wafer in a furnace, and that furnace, it is maintained at how much temperature? So it is maintained at 1000 degrees Celsius. So it is maintained at 1000 degrees Celsius. So what you will observe here is, once we go for this 1000 degrees Celsius and where we have kept our N-type wafer, then I'll open the door of that furnace and I'll expose that N-type wafer to the gas of higher concentration of boron atoms. So which gas I'm injecting into the furnace? I'm injecting P-type impurities, which are nothing but boron atoms, or I'm injecting impurities which belong to group 3. So you have your N-type layer, and that N-type layer, it is being exposed to a gas of travelent impurities. And this whole process, it is done at very high temperature, like hot atmosphere. And what is the temperature of that hot atmosphere? It is maintained at 1000 degrees Celsius. Then what you will observe here is, because we are at very high temperature, so at this high temperature, now boron atom, they'll start diffusing, and these boron atoms, they are in the state of gas. Okay, so these boron atoms, they diffused into the silicon. As you can see, whatever these gas of boron atoms are there, what they'll do, these gas atoms, they'll get diffused, they'll start penetrating on the top region of N-type layer. Okay, so they get diffused into the silicon, thereby forming PN junction. So your top layer, it is going to become P-type, and your down layer, it is going to become N-type. So you have here N-type substrate. On N-type substrate, you are growing P-type layer, thus giving rise to P-type impurity. And as we know that we are doing all this process at high temperature. So what is the difference between fused and alloyed or fused junction type, as well as this diffused junction type? In diffused junction type, you are taking your impurity atom in gas form, and you are doing it at very high temperatures. Whereas in fused type, what we are doing, we are putting a travelent impurity in molten state. Okay, not in molten state, we can take it in liquid state, or we can also we can take a material form also, solid form also, and we are going to keep it on the N-type layer, and when we heat it, then what you will observe here is those travelent impurities get diffused. Whereas here diffusion of travelent impurities, it is taking place in gas form. So that is the difference between fused type and of course diffused junction type semiconductors. So in today's session, here we have discussed about what happens once we bring P-type and N-type semiconductor closer, and once this PN junction is formed, how this diffusion of charge carriers takes place, and then after diffusion current forms, then there is formation of drift current. And what is drift current? Where charge carriers are forced to move because of electric field which is developed near the junction region, and there is a formation of layer. That layer, it is called as depletion layer, which is depleted of free charge carriers. So where we have collection of negative acceptor ions and positive donor ions. So what exactly are these ions? These ions are nothing but electrons migrating from N region to P region and losing their energy to holes in P region, and similarly holes from P region to N region and losing their energy to electrons in N region. And under equilibrium condition, because of this separation of charges, there is a formation of voltage, potential barrier, voltage, and this potential barrier, it is going to stop further diffusion of charge carriers. And then after that, we have seen what are the different methods of forming of p-n junctions. So in this video, we have discussed three types. The first one is ground junction type, where we'll take our intrinsic semiconductor in molten state, and then we are going to add our two different types of impurities at two different stages. And then next we have taken fused junction type, where we'll just bring these p-type and n-type layers together, and when we heat it, then we have diffusion of one type of impurity into the other type of semiconductor, opposite type of semiconductor. And then third type we have seen, where we are taking impurities in gas form, and this gas, it is given to n-type wafer, which is kept in a hot atmosphere in a furnace at 1000 degrees centigrade, and here also diffusion of that travelent impurity takes place onto the surface of opposite type of semiconductor. So with this, I'm going to end my session here. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.